This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Monday evening. I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A Taiwan opposition leader is released without bail due to lack of evidence in a graft probe, but prosecutors say they'll keep up their pursuit of Wen-je. China urges the European Union to be objective and fair after the bloc defended the Philippines following maritime clashes in the South China Sea. North Korea's plans to revamp its rural landscape to tackle economic hardships include new factories and facilities for health, science, and education. And Japan caught in the crossfire of a chip war between the US and China. Beijing warns of severe retaliation if Tokyo slaps more chip curbs at Washington's behest. Also ahead, we delve into the world of Japan's indigenous Ainu people, who are the earliest settlers in Hokkaido. The government is spending millions of dollars to help preserve and support their culture, but can it reverse generations of forced assimilation? A corruption probe in Taiwan has taken a dramatic turn that could ultimately have ramifications for Taiwan-China relations. Well, a court ordered the release of Wen-je, the leader of Taiwan's second-largest opposition party, after he was arrested on the weekend for alleged graft. Now, Mr. Ke, who ran for president in January, is under investigation for his role in a shopping center redevelopment project when he was Taipei city mayor. Well, CNA's Victoria Jen has the report.
这几天为了捍卫柯文哲的清白，为了厘清柯文哲购买
Taiwan media have been running marathon coverage of the corruption investigation of Wen-je since last week. The former Taipei mayor and presidential candidate was brought in by prosecutors for questioning last Friday after they raided his house and party offices. The development culminated with Ke's arrest on Saturday. He was detained after he tried to leave prosecutor's office during the investigation after refusing to be questioned at night. The case took another dramatic turn on early Monday morning. After a late-night hearing at the Taipei District Court, a judge ruled that the evidence provided by the prosecutors was insufficient to justify further detention of Ke and ordered his release without bail. Over the weekend, Ke's supporters held rallies outside the prosecutor's office in Taipei, calling the investigation a form of judicial oppression and politically motivated. Following his release, Ke accused prosecutors of making up stories and described their handling of his questioning as extremely oppressive and abusive.
他们在搜索以后查扣手机跟硬碟。 在拿里面的资料去编故事，在这2天当中，可以说是极尽压迫跟凌虐。
Ke and others were named in May in the scandal in which the developer of the downtown Core Pacific shopping center was given permission to massively expand the floor space available for lease during Ke's term as mayor between 2014 and 2022.
CNA's Victoria Jin joins us live now from Taipei. Vic, so Mr. Ke, he was released today without bail. What should we read into it? Does it mean he's out of the woods?
No, Wen-je is clearly not out of the woods yet. Because prosecutors have already appealed to the court ruling. So it remains to be seen whether the court would change its ruling depending on the evidence that the prosecutors have to present. Now, let me just take you through this case. Now, the development project is owned by the Core Pacific Group, which is owned by business tycoon Shen Qingjing. Now, records show that Wen-je approved the floor area ratio of the property from 560% to 840%. That is unprecedented in Taipei's history. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, the ratio basically, if it's higher, it means that the
developer will get more property, more space. And that would mean that the developer is going to benefit from the additional space. And so some critics say that the expansion is going to allow the group to actually benefit at least more than $1 billion US. So far, the investigation have already resulted in the detention of Wen-je's deputy while he was mayor, and also the group's chairman, as well as a city councilor who is suspected of facilitating the expansion. There's evidence that shows that she has received more than $1 million US from the group. So the investigators right now are trying to find out why Wen-je gave the approval and whether or not he has received financial reward for this deal.
So while investigations are still ongoing, we know that Mr. Ke is not out of the woods yet. This corruption investigation, though, and there are also other allegations of misconduct, that is throwing, would you say, his party into uncertainty as well?
Yes, clearly, because Wen-je has always campaigned on clean and transparent government that is different from the KMT and the DPP. His party, TPP, has emerged as the third force, especially after he garnered 26% of the vote in the presidential race in January. And he was still a strong contender in future races until the recent corruption scandals broke. Now, the latest scandal has shattered his squeaky clean image and reputation. The majority of his supporters are young Taiwanese who are counting on the third force to make a difference in the politics that have long been dominated by the KMT and the DPP. But many of them are disappointed by the latest scandal. And a recent poll shows that Wen-je's approval rating has plummeted by 1/3 since the presidential election. And interestingly enough, the approval rating for President William Lai has shot up to nearly 60%. And that is a 20% increase from the 40% vote that he won as president. So clearly, a lot of his supporters have switched their support to the DPP instead. Now, it's unclear whether the latest scandal is going to bring about the demise of the party, but it will really depend on the outcome of the investigation.
Yeah, what a big turnaround for Mr. Ke just in the last few days. I believe his case has also received a lot of media attention in China as well. What are they saying?
Well, Wen-je has been approaching the cross-strait issues on a rather more moderate approach. And so as far as Beijing is concerned, that his ideology is more in line with the Beijing-friendly KMT. Even though the TPP only holds about 8 seats in parliament, but it serves as a critical minority because neither the KMT nor the DPP has a majority in parliament. And so far, its alliance with the KMT has actually is seen as a force that will refrain the DPP from pushing ahead with its pro-independence agenda. And so far, we know that the latest scandal has already severely damaged his image as well as his reputation and weakened the party. But since the DPP is widely known as a one-man party, so if Wen-je goes down, analysts are saying that the party is likely to break apart. So many of the supporters are likely to throw their support behind the DPP. And analysts fear that this is going to give President William Lai a stronger mandate to push ahead with his pro-independence agenda. And this is definitely going to further escalate tensions across the Taiwan Strait.
Well, many thanks for that report. CNA's Victoria Jen speaking to us from Taipei. The South Korean police are investigating messaging platform Telegram for allegedly abetting the distribution of deepfake porn. Well, that's where faces of individuals are digitally superimposed onto pornographic images or videos. Public anger is growing after reports of deepfake porn featuring South Korean women. One case involved university students running an illegal Telegram chat room to share doctored images of their female classmates and teachers. Last week alone, police received 88 reports of deepfake porn. Well, the crackdown coincides with a French investigation into Telegram's founder over organized crime on the platform. South Korean authorities have urged social media firms to help delete and block the sexually explicit content. Last week, President Yoon Suk-yeol warned about the rapid rise of pornographic deepfakes in South Korea and vowed to eradicate the digital sex crimes. Telegram is yet to comment on the latest probe, but the company said last week that it moderates harmful content on its platform, including illegal pornography. A report last year said that South Korea is the country most targeted by deepfake porn. Its singers and actresses make up more than half of the individuals seen in such material. In other news, China is urging the European Union to be objective and fair after the bloc commented on tensions over the South China Sea. Well, the Chinese mission to the EU expressed strong dissatisfaction, saying that the bloc is not a party to the issue and has no right to point fingers. It added that the EU's repeated calls for freedom of navigation in disputed waters has no benefits to the bloc's own interest and international credibility. Both China and the Philippines have been clashing over the South China Sea in recent months. The latest saw the two exchanging blame for a collision between Coast Guard vessels. Now, the incident near Sabina Shoal was the fifth maritime confrontation between Manila and Beijing in a month. The EU had defended the Philippines and condemned what it called dangerous actions by Chinese Coast Guard vessels. Now, we spoke about the tensions in the South China Sea with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in a CNA exclusive interview. And he told us just a short time ago that he is absolutely convinced the situation in the region won't trigger a war.
I'm convinced because, the consequences would be so dramatic that I believe common sense will prevail.
And I will be bringing you more of our CNA exclusive interview with Mr. Guterres later in East Asia, on Asia Tonight, with his thoughts on the current state of the world order. Well, in the meantime, we are going to go for a short break, but coming up next on the bulletin, a tentative revival in East Asian factory activity spurred by robust chip demand. Shares of New World Development slump 13%. After the developer warned it will incur its first annual loss in 20 years as Hong Kong's property downturn persists. Hello again. Time now for our business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, today we're talking about factories in East Asia in August being a good month.
Yes, Oteli, the manufacturing did pretty well in general, led by new orders helping. The Chinese manufacturing PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, did bounce back from last month. This contrasts with the official data announced over the weekend, a sign of persistent uneven growth within China's vast factory sector. Now, August's PMI for the private sector rose to 50.4, and that's up from 49.8 in July. Remember, the 50 point separates growth from contraction. The reading mostly covers smaller export-oriented firms, and it paints a more optimistic picture than the official manufacturing PMI gauge out over the weekend. Now, covering larger, mostly state-owned companies, that survey showed that activity contracted for a fourth consecutive month in August. Asian factories are showing early signs of recovery, with activity boosted by the strong demand for chips. Now, in August, both South Korea and Taiwan saw their PMIs above the crucial 50 mark. Japan's factory activity, though still contracting, slowed its pace of decline thanks to a rebound in car production. Now, economists say while chip-producing regions like Taiwan and South Korea are seeing consistent growth, the uncertainty surrounding US and China could continue to cloud Asia's outlook. Now, for more analysis on these PMI numbers across Asia today, Rongren Go, Portfolio Manager, Fixed Income, at East Spring Investments, joins us now. Rongren, good to have you on the show as always. What does China's contrasting official and private PMI tell us about the health of the manufacturing sector in China?
Hi, Roland. Yeah, so in my opinion, I think that both PMI numbers actually tell similar stories. Yes, there's a little bit of deviation here. On one hand, you have the official numbers being slightly weaker, and of course, you have the Caixin PMI being slightly stronger. But by and large, it paints a similar picture of decelerating growth in China. And this is what investors like myself are actually focusing on. Truth of the matter is we know for a fact that exports have been very well supported by chip demand, as you mentioned, in some of the North Asian economies, such as Korea as well as Japan. In China's case, for the past 2 years, exports have been supported by strong demand for goods in the developed economies. But by and large, we have seen some shifts in consumer demand from goods towards services post-pandemic. So this will gradually take away some of the demand that we actually saw post-pandemic. This is one area of headwind that potentially China is going to face in the coming quarters, if not already. The second one, of course, is increasing trade tensions that we have observed between the US and China, as well as between Europe and China. We know for a fact that one of the bright sectors in manufacturing for China right now is the EV sector, and there are big plans for some of the major manufacturers to export the capacity to some of these major auto markets, but they are facing headwinds because of potential significant tariffs being imposed. So by and large, these worries and these concerns have not disappeared just because of the good numbers that we are seeing right now. So this is something that we are watching closely to form a medium-term assessment of Chinese economic growth in the next few quarters.
Rongren, what about Japan's case? I mean, with the BOJ likely to raise interest rates while the Fed is expected to trim them, how do you see a stronger yen affecting factory activity in Japan?
Yeah, so we need to first of all, I mean, I don't think that the yen currency is going to be a major driver of Japan factory activity. To put things into perspective, we started the year with dollar yen at 140. And right now, we had a round trip that went all the way to 160 before coming back down to 140. So the currency hasn't changed that much. The second thing to note, of course, is how currency strength or weakness actually affects factory activity. On one hand, of course, with a weaker yen, it actually improves the export competitiveness of the exporters, the manufacturers. But on the other hand, which was the concern for several investors, is the fact that the input costs have increased meaningfully over the past months because of yen weakness. So import costs actually go higher. By and large, these are, in my opinion, marginal factors. I think what's more important is the global demand for whatever Japan is manufacturing that is known for. For example, the advanced chips, its cars, its electronics equipment. This is really a function of the global consumption and the health of the global economy. So if we actually see a meaningful moderation in that area, I think that is probably the bigger driver for Japanese factory activity.
What about South Korea? Everybody wants South Korean chips. I mean, its manufacturing PMI has just gone up above 51. Will this be a pressure on the sector to raise wages as well as to add to inflationary pressures there?
Yeah, so a couple of points to make about Korean PMIs. So very clearly, the uptick in Korean PMIs is a reflection of this AI-driven demand for chips, which the Korean industry is very well plugged into, because as we know, the large producers like Samsung as well as SK Hynix, they actually make the high bandwidth memory chips, which are in strong demand globally because of this AI boom. So what we see here is an export-driven boost provided by AI. I think the question on everyone's mind is how long this can potentially last. And at the same time, we have to bear in mind that because manufacturing only makes up 25% of employment in South Korea. So even if there are certain bright sparks in the manufacturing economy, such as advanced chips, for example, the benefit in wages is going to be very narrowly based. It's not going to be broad-based. And inflation numbers certainly bear this out. It's been moderating towards the central bank's target of 2%. So I don't think this bright spark in the South Korean economy, which is driven by AI demand for chips, is going to be driving wages on a broad-based basis.
Rongren, we've run out of time. Thank you for those insights as always. Rongren Go, Portfolio Manager, Fixed Income at East Spring Investments. Greater China markets led the losses in East Asia. China's blue chip index of its top 300 stocks dropping 1.7% after the official manufacturing PMI for August showed a contraction, even though the smaller Caixin manufacturing PMI did beat expectations. Consumer staples and food and beverage stocks led the losers there. Meantime, the benchmark Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong fell by 1.65%. Shares of Hong Kong developer New World Development slumping 13% after the company issued a profit warning. It's expecting an annual loss of between $2.4 and $2.6 billion due to a shortfall in sales revenue on major completed projects, impairment charges, and interest rate increases. And turning to the stock market action outside of China, Japan's Nikkei 225 kicking off its first session of the month on the front foot. The weak yen helped to rise just above that 39,000 mark for the first time since late July. It ended the day, though, about 0.14% higher. South Korea's Kospi also closing in the green after the PMI survey showed improving factory activity, expanding for the fourth straight month. US-led efforts to limit China's access to advanced chip technology are complicated by Beijing's reported threats against Japan. Now, China is said to have threatened serious economic retaliation if Japan further limits the sales and servicing of chip-making equipment to Chinese firms. The US has been pressuring Japan to further squeeze the ability of domestic companies, including Tokyo Electron, to sell advanced chip-making tools to China. Now, to protect Japan against the fallout of China's retaliation, US officials are reportedly working with its Asian ally to ensure that it has enough critical mineral supply. And that's especially after China curbed the exports of gallium, germanium, and graphite last year. Washington's efforts to get Tokyo to step up their curbs on China has fueled concerns among Japanese firms. One of them, Toyota Motor. Now, it has reportedly conveyed to Tokyo its fears that Beijing might sever access to minerals essential to make cars. As one of Japan's most important companies, the world's best-selling automaker has a big say in the country's chip policy. Now, it had been stung before by China's temporary halt of rare earth exports to Japan back in 2010. And you're up to date with the business news.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight. Saving Japan's indigenous Ainu culture. A look at Tokyo's efforts to preserve parts of the heritage deemed critically endangered. But is it too little too late? Our senior correspondent, Michio Ishida, joins us after this break. A Taiwanese court orders the release of former Taipei Mayor Wen-je after he was arrested over the weekend in a corruption probe. Court officials say there was inadequate evidence. China urges the European Union to be objective and fair after the bloc defended the Philippines following maritime clashes in the South China Sea. And North Korea plans to revamp its rural landscape to tackle economic hardships, including new factories and facilities for health, science, and education. You may have been to Japan, but the chances of bumping into an ethnic Ainu person would be very slim. They are the earliest settlers in Hokkaido, but have faced decades of systemic suppression. Japan is spending millions of dollars to support the Ainu and their culture, but fears of discrimination remain, with their language on the brink of extinction. Well, CNA's Michio Ishida with this report.
Just a simple greeting in the Ainu language reveals the rich history of the indigenous group who live in northern Japan. Kenyu Yamamaru works at the National Ainu Museum in Shiraoi Town in Hokkaido. His greeting, Iran karapte, is used in his hometown, but Ainu elsewhere might not know it.
石おろれやいそろれいかたいという言葉で挨拶する地域もございますので、挨拶の言葉一つとってもこのように地域差がございます。
Experts think Ainu are descendants of the Jomon people, who inhabited Japan around 11,000 to 6,000 BC. They settled in Hokkaido, the north of Honshu, as well as the Kuril Islands and Sakhalin. The Ainu language split into several regional dialects. There is no written form, which makes it challenging to pass down. So what's the population of Ainu? Scholars say it's not clear. There is a once in 7 year survey conducted by the Ainu Association. It's on Ainus in Hokkaido. In 2017, they counted 13,118. Compared to 7 years before that, it's 3,668 less. Analysts think there are actually more Ainus than on record. Many do not wish to make public of their Ainu heritage. The Ainu were persecuted in Japan and their customs and traditions outlawed by its new Meiji government in the late 19th century. Fearing prejudice, some stopped speaking Ainu. Even today, many hide their identity and never tell their children about their Ainu roots. For Miyuki Muraki, the label of being Ainu haunted her throughout her childhood.
私自身子供の頃からこのアイヌのくせにみたいな形でね、結構いじめられたりとかもしていたので、ただやっぱりそういった部分でちょっとアイヌという言葉自体が嫌いだった時代があって。
64-year-old Miss Muraki hardly speaks the language. Those who can are now few and far between, which is why UNESCO has designated it as critically endangered. The National Ainu Museum and Park, also called Upopoi, an Ainu term for let's sing, is trying to revive the language. Signboards are written in Japanese characters that match Ainu phonetics, a new vocabulary created using loanwords for terms that do not exist in Ainu. There are also activities to promote the Ainu language. Here, Mr. Yamamaru is performing a piece from the Ainu's ancient storytelling tradition called yukar. The 30-year-old learned it from a recording left behind by his grandfather. Teaching Ainu was not Mr. Yamamaru's dream. He was an high school dropout. Ainu in general have less education and job opportunities, but he was able to take Ainu language classes as a child and never faced much discrimination.
白老という土地もアイヌが多いので、そういうのもあったと思うんですけど、白老の親戚ではないお世話になっているおじさんとかおばさんで、学校でいじめられたみたいな話とかはやっぱ聞きますね。
Mr. Yamamaru turned his life around when his late father Ikuo, an advocate for Ainu culture, suggested he take up a 3-year course for Ainu on their heritage. His father died suddenly from a heart attack before he could see the change in Mr. Yamamaru. And in Hokkaido, which is starting to awaken to its Ainu roots. At Hokkaido University in Sapporo, a staff shuttle began running announcements in Ainu in January.
The next stop is School of Engineering.
The idea was inspired by a similar program in another Hokkaido town, and it's driving up interest in the language.
頻繁に聞く言葉ではないので、そういう意味でホッとはなりますけど。
In 2008, the Diet passed a resolution to recognize the Ainu as indigenous people of Japan, following a UN declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples. In an atonement of sorts for the past, Japan is now pouring millions of dollars on Ainu-related policies like Upopoi, which has drawn more than 1 million visitors since it opened in 2020. but it cannot reverse a history of forced assimilation.
今もそうですけど、日本語を国語として日本語しか教えない。だからやはり少数者の文化であったり言葉であるっていうのはなかなか日が当たらないという。
Ainu, like Mr. Yamamaru, who embrace their identity, remain an exception. Beyond a flashy showcase, experts say what the Ainu need is for the public to be informed about the dark truth of discrimination, and a space where they can live without prejudice and reclaim their language and identity. Michio Ishida.
And for more, CNA's Michio Ishida joins us now from Tokyo. So, Michio, we've mentioned that UNESCO has designated the Ainu language as critically endangered. We've heard there that you've said about how there is no written form of the language. Many people, they still don't want to make public of their heritage. What else do you think is that makes it so hard to keep this culture alive?
Well, for one, it's because it's not a written language. There's no written record. What even makes it even more difficult to preserve the language, even those above the age of 60 who I met told me that their grandparents chanted in the language, but they did not try to speak it. Well, as I said in my report, the Meiji government since the 1900s tried to assimilate, 19th century tried to assimilate the Ainu to the Japanese society, educating them in what the Ainu called Wajin language and culture. To the people of Ainu, anything Japanese which was not Ainu is still called Wajin. Now, the people of Ainu were banned from carrying on with their own customs and tradition. However, the Ainu language was not banned, but afraid of facing discrimination, they stopped speaking their own language. And because of discrimination, I've been told by many academics and Ainu people that many who had Ainu blood did not want to be known they had Ainu blood. And so 0.7% of Ainu people speak their ancestral language, that's all. And this is according to a survey by the prefecture of Hokkaido. And those in the area I stayed in Shiraoi town was pretty open about their Ainu heritage compared to Ainu in other parts of Hokkaido because they have an Ainu community. And many know each other from their grandparents' times, for example. But when I asked them how many with Ainu heritage worked at the National Ainu Museum and Park, or Upopoi, which I covered, they didn't know. They would answer when asked about themselves, but not about their colleagues, indicating it's still a sensitive matter to talk about.
Oh, that's such a shame. And the government is making efforts to try and bolster in terms of trying to revive the Ainu language and the culture. But, you know, Michio, the thing is, how worried are you that this is the language and the culture could go extinct?
You know, the loss of language is a loss of tradition, culture, and knowledge, as academics say, which means a loss of information to unveil the history of humankind. So reviving the language to study its tradition and culture is vital. Now, the foundation of Ainu culture, which is backed by Hokkaido government, says it's only around the 15th century that historic materials mention the Ainu. They were fishing, hunting, and picking plants, and were active in trade. Because there was no written form of history by the Ainus themselves, there's still so much research needed. And historians know they had a big presence in Hokkaido. They also lived in parts of Sakhalin and the Kurils and part of northern Honshu, which is the main Japanese island. Now, the Tokugawa shogunate mistreated them as laborers, according to the foundation. Then in the late 1800s, they were forced to assimilate with the Japanese society. But the game changer was when UNESCO, United Nations, declared the rights of the indigenous people in 2007. The Japanese government came under pressure to recognize the Ainu. And to promote the Ainu culture, the National Ainu Museum and Park, Upopoi, opened in 2020. A huge budget's been allocated to this park, and analysts say it's paved the way to encourage more to study and preserve the language and tradition of the Ainu people.
So aside from those initiatives that you have already mentioned, what else is being done to breathe new life into the language as well as the community and I suppose to keep discrimination at bay?
let me go back a little bit. Well, Shiraoi Town, which I featured, for instance, started a small folk museum of the Ainu in 1967 and has been regularly holding traditional performances, hoping that people will come and watch and gain understanding of the Ainu tradition and hear their language. And that's the predecessor of Upupoi. There are Ainu-related museums actually all over Hokkaido displaying arts and crafts of the Ainu of that particular region. Now, as to promoting the language itself, a local radio station in Hokkaido broadcasts the Ainu language, and a YouTuber of Ainu heritage is involved in this radio station. All over Hokkaido, school children are distributed booklets about the Ainu, and in particular in Biratori town in Hokkaido, which is another area with a huge Ainu community. From this year, they started to teach Ainu language in the local elementary school. That's a promising sign, but there is still a lack of promoting nationwide awareness of the Ainu and its dying language. In fact, when I told my friends and relatives in Japan I was doing a story on the Ainu language, the Ainu people, they reacted with surprise. They're not familiar with the language, let alone who the Ainu people are.
Oh, well, Michiyo, I'm going to look out for those Ainu museums when I'm in Hokkaido the next time. Thanks so very much for that report, Michiyo Ishida there in Tokyo. And of course, you can catch the full CNA Correspondent episode on the CNA.Asia and on YouTube as well. Now, we'll have more on regional efforts to preserve culture in tomorrow's edition of East Asia Tonight. What's being done in South Korea's largest island, Jeju, to protect its unique centuries-old language, one that's also classified as critically endangered by UNESCO? I'll be sure to tune in for that. North Korea is pushing to develop its rural areas amid concerns over economic challenges and poor living conditions. State media KCNA reports that the country aims to build factories as well as other modern facilities for health, science and education outside of Pyongyang. Leader Kim Jong-un convened a high-level meeting over the weekend and inspected a construction site in South Hamgyong province. He noted that building light industry factories in local areas alone is not enough to provide residents with basic material and cultural living standards. The leader also called for hospitals under construction to be completed by the end of the year. The north, which depends heavily on agriculture, faces food shortages amid sanctions over its nuclear programs and extreme weather events. This comes amid wider efforts to set up modern factories in at least 20 remote counties every year for the next decade. Still, the leader stressed the importance of quality over speed. Pyongyang has launched a military unit and mobilized troops nationwide to spur the initiative. South Korean officials and experts, however, have doubted the plan's feasibility due to the country's shortage of resources. The remnants of Typhoon Shanshan continue to lash northern and western parts of Japan. Experts warn its rain bands could linger on for a few more days. The storm has since weakened to a tropical depression after making landfall on Thursday last week. Localized downpours continued to affect multiple areas. One city in northwest Japan saw as much as 50 millimeters of rainfall in an hour. Officials have cautioned residents to be on the alert for landslides and flooding, as well as violent winds and lightning strikes. Bullet train services, which saw days of disruptions due to the slow-moving storm, have fully resumed operations. But why is Shanshan moving so slowly? Well, Japan's Met Agency says that a high-pressure system blocked the storm's path northwest towards Kyushu. Also contributing to the lack of speed, westerly winds in the Pacific Ocean that normally drive typhoons along are not present near Shanshan this time. An expert from Kyoto University also stated that global warming may have caused the lack of winds from the Pacific and that this trend is only likely to continue. At least 11 people have died as Tropical Storm Yagi lashes the Philippines for a second day. Authorities have shut schools and cancelled flights in and around the capital, Manila. Government work has also been suspended. The streets are now flooded in the northern part of the country. Locals were seen wading in waist-deep water. The storm, which has brought heavy rains and gusty winds, is expected to make landfall later today. People living near the coast have been told to evacuate to safer ground. The country's weather agency said that scattered thunderstorms will inundate Metro Manila, much of Calabarzon and Mindanao. The Philippines experiences up to 20 major storms every year. Yagi will be the fifth such storm to hit the country this year. Yagi, better known as Enteng in the Philippines, formed from a low-pressure system out at sea. It has been gaining strength and is set to swirl in a northwesterly direction over the north of the country in the coming days and towards southern China. Coming up next on the bulletin, the UN chief speaks exclusively to CNA, blaming geopolitical division for blocking efforts to resolve conflicts around the world. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong says the country will continue to do whatever it can to support the UN's mission and Secretary General Antonio Guterres' leadership. He adds that Singapore will offer ideas, build bridges and broker solutions. Mr. Guterres completes his three-day official visit to Singapore today. He's in Singapore at the invitation of Mr. Wong. PM Wong praised the UN chief's commitment to international law and the UN Charter that helps assure the well-being, security and integrity of countries. He also paid tribute to Mr. Guterres' advocacy on global equity and justice, and he noted the UN chief's tireless effort in strengthening multilateralism.
The UN is a unique institution of special importance to Singapore. It remains the only global body with universal participation and legitimacy. The UN framework respects the independence of its member states and gives each of them a voice in international affairs. At the same time, it recognizes the interdependence of nations and provides a platform for countries to address common challenges together. Singapore is committed to strengthening the UN.
Earlier, Mr. Guterres spoke exclusively to CNA's Lok Wei Su. He says geopolitical division is preventing his organization from tackling conflicts around the world. Now, here is an excerpt of the interview.
We are not in a multipolarity moment. We are in a chaotic moment. I lived a bipolar world in the Cold War. It's true that Soviet Union and the United States were fighting each other by proxy in many situations, but whenever there was a serious problem and that to be solved, they would come together and solve it. Remember the agreement on disarmament, remember the agreement on South Africa, Angola, Namibia and Cuba that solved one of the most difficult conflicts that we had in Southern Africa. Now, then I lived a period of American supremacy. And indeed, in East Timor, the moment the President of the United States decided that an intervention was necessary, everybody accepted. The Security Council voted unanimously. There were no geopolitical divides. Indonesia accepted it. Australia led it. And the Timorese people was rescued and independence became a reality. Now, today, we are no longer bipolar, we are no longer unipolar, but we are not yet multipolar. We are chaotic. The truth is that we live in a situation in which practically there are no rules. And the fact that we live in this kind of chaotic situation, because multipolarity is something that creates an equilibrium, that creates a balance, and that allows for a negotiation. That's not what we are witnessing today. Witnessing today is each one doing what each one wants, without any kind of consultation, without any kind of the normal and the logic functioning of a multipolar society.
And we'll have much more from our CNA exclusive interview with UN Chief Antonio Guterres later on Asia Tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Singapore's boccia athlete Geraldine Tan had to settle for a silver medal at the Paralympic Games in Paris after a heartbreaking final loss by the narrowest of margins. The 35-year-old becomes only the fourth Paralympic medalist in the country's history after swimmers Yip Pin Siu and Teresa Goh and equestrian Laurentia Tan. Well, Tan entered the gold medal match against France's Aurélie Aubert, having already beaten her 6-1 in their group match. The Singaporean found Aubert in great form and was behind 5 points to nothing by the halfway mark. Tan refused to be cowed, took the fight to Aubert and cut the deficit in the third end. Drama ensued in the fourth when Aubert gave up her remaining throws in a tactical move and regretted immediately as she had miscalculated the points. It gave Tan a chance to take the lead, but the final throw by the Singaporean proved agonizingly short. She lost the game 5-4. In women's singles SL3 para-badminton, China's Xiao Zhixian beat Indonesian world number 1, Konita Iktia Shakuro 2-0. In a closely fought match, Xiao and Shakuro kept spectators on the edge of their seats. And after exchanging many points, it was the Chinese shuttler who came out on top. She might have only achieved silver today, but Konita Shakuro has already cemented her place as being a tremendous para-shuttler at just 22 years old. Right, in the playoff to determine the bronze medal winner in women's singles SL3, Ukraine's Oksana Koizna lost to Nigeria's Mariam Eniola Balaji 2-0. No real losers in this match. The Ukrainian para-badminton player met a teacher from the orphanage where she was raised. The Nigerian para-shuttler honored her former trainer who was killed in a road accident. And what a Paralympic debut for Ethiopia's Yayesh Getesfor. Not only did the flag bearer win gold for her country in the women's 1.5-kilometer T11, but she also smashed the world record that she set back in Kobe this year. China's He Shanshan hot on her heels with a new area record, 4 minutes, 32 seconds, 38. And bronze win to Luzanne Kutze of South Africa, who set a new personal best. Central Asia was out in force in the men's long jump T12. Azerbaijan's Saeed Najavzad traded in his bronze from 2020 for gold in 2024, jumping 7.27 in his fifth attempt. Now, Uzbekistan's Donil Salev falling ever so slightly short with 7.16 and taking home the silver. And third place went to Fernando Vasquez from Argentina with 6.88. Staying with athletics, Claudine Batista of Brazil won gold in the men's discus throw with a new Paralympic record of 46.86. India's Yogesh Kathunia won silver. The 27-year-old managed a throw of 42.22, which was his season's best. And bronze went to Greek Konstantinos Zounis. The Chinese national anthem was playing after para-archery mixed team W1. The team from Beijing beat their Czech opponents by a slim margin, 147 to 143, to bag the gold. The two teams competed head-to-head throughout, but Chen Minyi and Zhang Tianxin were marginally ahead. 2 sets of 10 points from the Chinese couple sealed the match. And another close match in the race for bronze. Italy beat Korea 134 to 132. With that, let's take a look at the medal tally. China leads the board with 36 gold, followed by Great Britain with 23 gold medals. Now, the two countries in a league of their own in that listing. The US is in third place with 9 gold medals. Singapore has added the boccia silver to its haul, 2 gold and 1 silver. And whoever said proposing is reserved just for the Olympics? Well, Italy's T63 runner Alessandro Ossola first ran the men's 100 meters and then ran to the stands to propose to his girlfriend, Ariana Mandarodoni. And much to the delight of the 40,000 spectators in the Stade de France, she replied with a resounding yes. And of course, it's a very happy ending to a tragic story for Ossola. He lost his first wife and the majority of his left leg in a motorcycle accident back in 2015. Now, he credits sports and his now fiancée for taking him out of a very dark period in his life. The Italian runner told reporters at times Ariana Mandarodoni believed in him more than he believed in himself. And on that heartwarming note, we wrap up East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. You can also look us up, Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.